Craig Andrews. Wow. What a story. High school student, didn't do well, didn't have a direction, joined the Marines for 6 years, started a marketing sales firm. We opened up the conversation about, relationship building and how sales should be viewed as a courtship, not just people love to buy, but they hate to be sold to. In August of 2021, Craig got the Delta variant, COVID-19. He was hospitalized. He was in a coma for 6 weeks. Doctors had no hope for him. He would hear his wife, Karen. It gave him hope, gave him inspiration. He came out of it. I'm going to tell you something about cow's milk, raw cow's milk that was involved. You'll be fascinated to learn. He had to relearn how to walk. Fascinating story, and how he wrapped it all around now and where he's learned from it. His relationship with discipline, it was so strengthened and so tightened in the military. Without it and his wife, he feels that he wouldn't have been able to make it through. But just how he wraps everything, his life experiences with what he does now with clients, it's just inspiring, and he's full of life, and it's just wonderful. I really enjoyed this conversation. The time flew by very quickly. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Very cool. Craig Andrews, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. So why should sales be viewed as a courtship?
Oh, well, I guess mostly because it is, it's, and let me just preface that we deal in high ticket sales. We work with folks that have high ticket, high trust, and
define that.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. High ticket is in the eyes of the person writing the check. And so typically we think, sometimes 4, usually 5, 6, or 7 figures. But just last week I was talking to somebody, I was at a mastermind, and I was asking him, how much he charged for his product. And he said $50. And then I asked him, where are you selling it? And he said, in Latin America. I said, well, what's the income of the people writing that check? And he said, they make $1,000, maybe $2,000 a month. I'm like, so that's like 5% of their income. I'm like, that's a high ticket purchase. Yeah. It's high ticket if it's in the eyes of the person writing the check. And so, that's our space. That's, where we understand the market best. And, the analogy I like to use is, sometimes I've actually known somebody who would walk into a bar, go up to a complete stranger and say, hey, you know what? You're kind of cute. Can I have your phone number? Or let's get married. Or in their case, they actually asked for something else. And we look at that and people laugh. And they're like, oh my goodness, that's inappropriate. And I agree. But for some weird reason, something that we know not to do in normal human relationships, when it comes to high ticket sales, we adopt exactly that behavior. We just go in, hey, how do you do? I'm Craig. I've got this 6-figure program. You're going to love it. What do you say? Let's just sign right now. And it's, it's just too much too soon. we think there should be like a little coffee date in there.
Let, let's dance before we date.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you do that, I mean, it just, when you do it and you do it right, and doing it right, I got to say that is so key. And it's not, it sounds easy. I can tell you because I made a lot of mistakes figuring this out.
Mm.
It's a lot harder, but when you do it right, it builds insane levels of trust at super speeds.
So why is it true that people love to buy but hate to be sold to?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say that it's about control and
Mm.
autonomy. It's the the best salespeople. And by the way, let me just say, I'm not a good salesperson. I completely suck at sales.
Really?
And yeah, so I mean, the way I came upon this was once I finally accepted I completely suck at sales. I said, well, instead of trying to sell, let me create an environment where people want to buy.
Mm.
And what that does is that gives them the sense that they're in the driver's seat. It gives them autonomy. It helps them have
Mm.
control over their decisions. And I saw something. Let me kind of tie this in. We just went through a few years of kind of craziness with COVID, and we had governments and what have you telling people what they could do, what they couldn't do,
Yeah.
and all these different things. I started noticing this behavior at the grocery store primarily that I had never seen before. And it was bizarre. I would see cars just pull right in front of the front door of the grocery store and sit there for like 5 minutes while somebody walked in and bought something. They're like completely blocking traffic. And then I
Mm.
started seeing the same thing at Starbucks. I was like, I've never seen this before. Normally people are a lot more polite. I mean, I live in Texas, so you never know who's packing, and so you naturally want to be a little more polite to the folks around you. And I'd never seen it before. And as I was trying to figure out why I was seeing this, the best answer I came up with was, for a couple years now, people have lost their autonomy. People have been coming in and telling them, this is how you have to behave. And that behavior, I believe, was people kind of acting out as they tried to regain autonomy in their lives. So the sense of control, the sense of autonomy is a huge, huge need that people have. And the more you can give that to your prospects, that they feel like they're in control, they're driving the ship, uh, you actually close more deals that way.
Mm. Why does sales have such a dirty, just vibe connotation? People have the worst, not all, but many have the worst kind of, view of it. I deal with a lot of small business, a lot of tech small businesses. And, Craig, the main way they can grow is through sales, and they have to get, used to that. Why do you think it's there, and what can we do to change it?
Well, I'll talk about my own journey because that's what I know best.
Good.
The so I took a bunch of sales training, and I got some sales scripts, I got some questions. Every time I went through it, I felt dirty, because it
Mm.
felt manipulative.
Hmm.
You're asking these questions, and you know, and from a student's perspective, I look at it and see, okay, I understand why those questions are set up, but the questions are kind of, like hurting your sales prospect, kind of into the gates to go into the slaughterhouse, to kind of get slaughtered. And maybe you truly believe that that decision's good for them, but at the end of the day, when they feel like they just got railroaded and pushed into a decision, they don't leave feeling that good. And getting the sale is part of the deal, but you want people feeling good about the sale afterwards.
Mm.
And especially again in the type of people that we work with, usually they're looking for repeat customers, and they're looking for customers that will refer them. And it's much better when somebody goes through your sales funnel can go off and tell others, you know what? Working with Joe was amazing.
Hmm.
He did this and he did this and he did this and he did this. And then they go start telling your story of how you help them as a customer. Well, the things that are going to drive that is, if one of the things I would say is, if you respect their autonomy.
Hmm.
Um, Now we certainly stack the deck. I mean, when we're putting together an offer, we're building offers that are really hard to say no to. But it's not from the perspective of, you better say yes or these bad things will happen to you.
Hmm.
It's more of, kind of back to courtship. You know, when you're going off and you meet somebody new and you're hoping it leads to things, you know, you're trying to woo them in. You're trying to say, hey, life with me is good. And life with me will deliver all these things. And sometimes it's phony, and they can sense that. There's something that changes in your body language when you feel the pressure to sell.
Hmm.
And as soon as people feel like they're being sold, their guard goes up. So here, let me tell you a story tied to courtship. When I've been married for 11 years now, and when I met my wife, we went out on a couple dates, looked interesting. I thought, hey, there could be something really here. And I invited her over. We sat out on my back deck and I said, hey, I need to tell you something. Now, we got married later in life. Her kids were grown. She had her kids really young, but her kids were grown. They were moving on. One was about to graduate college. The other already had. And I said, you probably had a different vision for this phase of life for you. I know she wasn't planning to get divorced. And she probably had plans to go off and travel and do all these different things at this stage in life. And I said, I need to tell you something. I'm starting my own business. And I want to let you know what's probably going to happen. By far, the most likely outcome is the business will fail. And if by some small chance it doesn't fail, then we'll make a modest but livable income. Let's not even talk about, wild riches, because so few people make it into that. But this is a journey I'm on. This may not be where you are in life. And if this is not what you want, now's the time to figure that out. And that will be okay. I won't be offended. This is a journey I'm on. If you're looking for something different out of life, that's, God bless you, make that choice.
Hmm.
And she came back and told me, she said, that was so incredibly endearing to her, because, she had a lot of other guys saying, hey, I'm going to give you the sun, the moons, and the stars and all that. And she said, I felt like Craig came out and he was just being honest.
Hmm.
And so that won her over. But again, think about the elements there. I was affirming what she probably wanted in life. I was giving her autonomy. I was giving her all the things. The choice was hers. And I wasn't trying to do any kind of ninja marketing tricks on her. I was just being honest.
Yeah, honesty pays a lot. That's a wonderful. And you have just make a little segue to your wife and how she really stuck with you. So you went to the hospital, Craig, and you had Delta variant, and the doctors misdiagnosed you, and you were in a bad situation. And tell us about it, and tell us how raw cow's milk played into it.
Oh my goodness. Oh, okay. Oh, that's quite the story. Yeah. So August 10th, 2021, I walked into the hospital. I go up to the desk,
Oh,
walk into the ER and say, I am having trouble breathing. And they immediately took me back, put me on oxygen. And 11 days later, they shot me up full of morphine, which is probably not good if you're having problems
oh,
breathing.
Craig.
And they called my wife a few hours after that and said, hey, we want to put Craig on the ventilator. Now, like you said, this was Delta variant. If you went on the ventilator with Delta variant, you died. That was the outcome. And, and they called her.
My editor will put it all back together August of 2021, something very traumatic happened to you, and there was a strong relationship to raw cow's milk.
Yeah. Yeah. So August 10th, 2021, I walked into the hospital, walked up to the desk, and I said, I am having trouble breathing.
Mm.
And they immediately took me back. They put me on oxygen. I had COVID. It was the Delta variant. And 11 days later, they shot me full of morphine. And a few hours later, they called my wife and they said, hey, we need to put your husband on the ventilator. Neither of us wanted that because we both knew that anybody that went on the ventilator with Delta variant, they died.
Mm.
And my wife said, started asking the doctors. She said, well, he doesn't want to go on the ventilator. As a matter of fact, she could hear me in the background screaming, no ventilator, no ventilator. And the doc said, oh, you can't listen to him. He's full of morphine.
Mm.
And she said, well, he doesn't want to go on the ventilator. And the doc laughed and said, well, if he doesn't, he'll be dead in 24 hours. And she said, well, how many people have you had survive that you put on the ventilator? And he said, nobody survived. And that was the constant message they delivered to my wife, not just to my wife, but I'm pretty sure they were talking about that around me while they thought I couldn't hear. And, um, and so, they not only did they say I was going to die, they actually had her meet with hospice to plan the day they were going to pull the plug. While I was out, I was out, it was lights out for me for 6 weeks. I had all these dreams. And for me, these dreams were reality. This was my reality. And so much so that even this morning, I was asking my wife about, I said, hey, did we have such and such conversation? And she said, oh, no, I would have remembered that. No, we never had that conversation. I mean, so
Mm.
even now, like a year and a half later, it's still not clear to me what was reality, what was a dream. And um, and so about a week and a half after I woke up, I called my wife over to the side of the bed and I said, hey, I need to tell you some things. I need you to tell me if these were real or not. And I started off, I said, have we been to Louisiana? And she said, no, we haven't been to Louisiana. You see, in my world, I'd gone to a resort in Louisiana to recover, to recuperate. And this resort had an interesting room service menu that you might expect to find in place in Louisiana. And one of the things on the menu was I could have young ladies come into the room and spray raw cow's milk at my face. And when they did, it made me feel better. And so I kept hitting that, get the ladies in, they'd spray raw cow's milk at my face, it made me feel better. And after a while, they came in on the speaker in the room and they said, Mr. Andrews, it is time for you to leave. You need to leave. And I said, well, I can't move. Somebody's going to have to come in here and get me. And they started getting angry saying, no, you must leave. You got to leave. You don't have a choice. I'm like, I can't move. And they got angrier and angrier. And they said, hey, if you don't leave, we're going to tell your wife about your room service. I said, well, you can tell her. She knows I like raw cow's milk. There's no secrets there. And I actually at some point started trying to roll out of bed thinking if I could fall on the floor, somebody would at least have to come in and pick me up. And I heard the mumbling in the background. They said, let's get his wife. And my wife came in. She put her hand on my left shoulder. And she said, Craig, this is Karen. I'm your wife. It's going to be okay. And as I told Karen that story, she said, oh my goodness, Craig, I said those exact words to you when you were in your coma. Mm. And, and since then, as I was kind of piecing things together, I was like, where did that raw cow's milk come from? Well, it turns out they have these things in the hospital these people called respiratory techs. And the respiratory technicians would come in several times a day, usually young ladies, and they would put a mask of nebulized albuterol on my face. That was a breathing treatment and would make me feel better. My brain just processed that as raw cow's milk, which is bizarre because I don't think I've ever had raw cow's milk in my life. But that's just kind of how the brain processed it. And so, yeah, it was a really wild journey, but there's like a really important lesson that comes out of that. In the 6 weeks I was asleep, when I woke up, my trust in the doctors plummeted. It
Mm.
fell through the floor. My trust in my wife skyrocketed through the
Mm.
roof. So much so that the doctors would come and they'd say, "Hey, we want to do such and such." And if the doctors came asking, my answer was always no. I didn't trust them. But so they would go to my wife and they'd say, "Hey, we need you to convince your husband to do these things." And in hindsight, some of the things they were asking were immensely right. It was just at the time my brain was still kind of scrambled from the coma and not functioning. Not I wasn't clear headed. My brain wasn't functioning well at that time. But if my wife said, she'd come and say, "Hey, they want you to do this," and I'd ask her, "Is it safe?" And she'd say, "Oh yeah, absolutely." And that ties in a Maya Angelou quote where she said, "People will forget what you said, they will forget what you do, but they will never forget how you made them feel." And while the doctors were speaking words of death and despair into me, thinking I couldn't hear them, my wife was speaking words of life and hope.
Mm.
And when I think back to the whole sales cycle, we do this thing we call an irresistible first time offer. It's kind of like a coffee date. Instead of going straight for the high ticket sale, we usually do like a little mini project. And the purpose of that is to kind of fulfill that Maya Angelou quote. When you come in and you work with somebody on this small project, you get an opportunity to influence how they feel about you in a way that you never can in a sales conversation. And you have the choice. You can speak words like my doctor spoke to me, and they will never trust you again. Or you could be like my wife, speak words of hope and life into them, help them solve a problem. And when you do that, trust just goes through the roof.
So you bring that into your business professional life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it was a game changer. And the the way I got there it wasn't some genius, or wasn't some epiphany. I didn't look up into the heavens, hear the words of God say, "Craig, go do this." I was desperate because I wasn't selling and I needed to put food on the table, and everything I
Mm.
was trying wasn't working. And because I'm not a good salesperson, and so at some point it hit me. I was like, no sales pitch can overcome a bad offer, but an exceptional offer can overcome any sales pitch.
Mm.
And so we just moved the work to the offer to let the offer do the heavy lifting. And the beauty of that is you can put almost anybody in the sales role. The big things are they going to listen more than they talk? And are they going to help the customer preserve their autonomy and give them a choice and not try to ramrod this thing down their throat? If they can do those two things, they can sell these. And it's a better experience for the customer. It's a better experience for the company selling. It's a better experience for everybody, and it's more delightful.
Going back to your coma, Craig. So 6 weeks, you're out. You're in a coma for 6 weeks, and you feel you're in this Louisiana resort. Had you ever been to a Louisiana resort, by the way?
No, I'm not even sure Louisiana has resorts, but I mean, I'm in Texas. I'm in the center of Texas. You have to drive 6 hours. You have to be determined to get out of Texas if you're
Sure.
driving. And Louisiana borders like 5 or 6 hours away. But I've gone that way, and usually I just hit the gas and try to speed through the state to get to wherever I'm going. And
It's a lovely state.
it is. But it's weird. I mean, my brain had constructed a lot of things. In my world, there was actually a strip that was much like the Vegas Strip, except it lined both sides of the Mississippi, and
Hmm.
there was kind of a monorail that would go around this Louisiana Strip and take you to the different casinos and resorts. And so I was actually in more than one resort in Louisiana in my world. And it was wild because when I woke up, it was very real to me.
It
I
was.
thought that's what had really happened.
And through this time, your wife, Karen's giving you hope. And do the doctors have, what are they telling her for 6 weeks? He's going to get out of it. He might not get out of it. What's happening on the real side?
Nah, the doctors were horrible. I mean, they were just horrible.
Really?
They, they drug her into a conference room, put my chart on the wall, and chart said prognosis, multiple organ failure leading to death. At the time, I was in kidney failure and on dialysis. Um, the, the doctors were really horrible. And, the day before I transferred out of that hospital, so I was in 3 different hospitals. That one, which was acute care, and then a LTAC, which is kind of like I think LTAC stands for long-term acute care. That's where you go to recover after you go into a hospital that you or I might recognize, the ones we see on the side of the road. And then finally, I was in a rehab hospital. Well, the day before I left the acute care hospital where I was on the ventilator, I was on the ventilator at the LTAC a little bit as well, but I'm about to be the first patient to leave the ICU alive.
Wow.
I mean, enormously rare. Everybody, if you got Delta variant and you went on the ventilator, you died. That was what happened. And I was about to be their very, very first survivor. And the doctor comes in the room and she says, "Isn't this wonderful news?" And the doctor kind of gives her a smug look and says, "Well, he's very weak." And she's like, "I'll take weak. He's alive."
He's upset that you're. It's an odd time in our history. This whole thing, yeah, that's horrible.
Yeah.
Very horrible. But Craig, you had to learn how to walk again.
Yeah. Yeah. That was wild. Well, at first, so again, my reality was my dreams. So when I was in the LTAC, the second hospital, I was trying to bust out of there like you wouldn't believe. I didn't want to be there. I hated it. And my wife, I started negotiating with my wife. I was like, "Hey, can we go home?" She's like, "No, you can't go home." And so then I start changing the ask. I'm like, "What if we just go home for a couple days or a couple hours, half a day and work through things?" At this time, I didn't realize I was in San Antonio, which is like 90 minutes away from where I live. And she's like, "No, you can't leave." And I told her, I said, "Karen, I've already been up several times. I've already been out." And actually in my world, I'd actually left the hospital. I'd stolen her car, landed at a abandoned Borders bookstore. You remember Borders bookstores?
Of course.
Yeah, I was at a Borders bookstore that had turned into a flop house. And I'm sitting there and some nurse walks in and she looks at me and she says, "You look all drugged up." And then she looks at me and she said, You look like," and I won't go into the details, "but it looks like you need something medically." At the time, that made no sense to me. But now that I know, it was a real thing that they had to do to me, in treating my trach. And she said, "I'm not going to touch that thing on your chest." And and then she left. And somehow I got myself back to the hospital. But the I believed I could walk. When I woke up, I believed I could walk. And reality was I could wiggle fingers and toes, but I couldn't lift an arm. I couldn't lift a leg.
Wow.
And I was awake for about 2 weeks before I stood for the first time, not on my own strength. It was with a PT who helped me stand. And when I stood, I'll never forget how it felt. It was like rods of pain rising from my feet and shooting through my entire body.
Wow.
And then they transferred me to a rehab hospital. And it was about a week and a half after I got there that I walked for the first time. And I walked for 10 feet. Then I sat down and I panted like I just sprinted a mile.
Mm.
And so I kept working to get my walk further and further. So that was on the parallel bars. Then they got me on the walker. When I left the hospital, the furthest I'd walked was 70 feet. And then they sent me home. And, I'd walk around downstairs. Our bedroom's upstairs, and my wife got a friend to give us a bed to put in the living room. My home was the living room. My bedroom was the living room for about 6 months after I got out of the hospital.
Wow.
And all that time, I'm trying to rebuild strength. And PT would come over for home health, and we live on a cul-de-sac. He'd take me out into the cul-de-sac and walk laps around the cul-de-sac. But I tell you what, it was hard. It's without a doubt one of the hardest things I've ever done.
So you were still having like these dreams that you were in different places even out of the coma?
No, that cleared up. Um, that started clearing up. Um, that cleared up by the time I asked my wife, "Hey, I need to tell you some things." So here's the thing
Mm,
that triggered that. I mean, I'd said a few things and I'd watched people's reactions, and I started realizing what I just said happened, they don't believe happened.
mm.
And I was starting to realize that my grip on reality had been lost. And my brother and his wife were wonderful. They drove from Maryland to Texas twice. First time that when they put me on the ventilator, they came down to be with my wife. And then when I was at the LTAC, they came down to be with me when my wife was at work, just to make sure somebody was with me all the time. And my one day, my brother is just trying to make conversation, and he said, "Craig," he was talking about was talking about last time went to my house. Well, in my world, he had never been to my house.
Hmm.
I'd actually forgotten my house of 18 years. And I believed I lived in a completely different house, a fictitious house. And
Wow.
that it had a really wild patio. And there's a story behind this. But the patio was walled with these 10-foot by 10-foot concrete sections. In the seams where the sections came together, in the middle of the seam was petals of a flower embossed into the concrete. And in the center of the flower was a hole, 3/4 inch hole, where little birds lived, and they would stick their heads out periodically. In
Hmm.
my world, that's where I lived. And I'm listening to my brother talk about where, a visit to my house. I'm thinking internally, you've never been to my house. And I got scared. I was like, if they realize I've lost grip with reality, they're going to take away privileges. They're going to lock me down. I'm going to live this limited life if they think I don't know what reality is. So I looked at my brother and I said, "Hey, Brent, when was the last time you were at my house?" He said, "Well, I was there last month when you were on the ventilator." I said, "Well, tell me about your visit. What did you do when you were there?" And what I was doing was getting my brother to
Mm.
describe my house to me. And as he was talking, I started remembering my house. So at that point, that was kind of the point where, the dreams had stopped, and now I'm having to kind of reacquaint with reality. And it was like a day or two after that conversation with my brother that told my wife, "Hey, I need to tell you some things, and will you tell me what's real and what's not?" So since then, those dreams have stopped, but there are still things that happen in my dream state where I'm like, was that real life or was that a dream?
So you were a terrible student in high school, and so you joined the Marines. You went into the military. Did you start your agency before this incident in the hospital or after?
Yeah, it was before. Um, I started this about 12 years ago,
Hmm.
and I was in the hospital approaching 2 years ago. So yeah, I'd already been in business. Actually, here's something that's really cool. When I woke up, and like I said, my brain was really scrambled for a week or two after I woke up. But once my wife could see I was a little more coherent, she started telling me what had been going on. She told me about what was going on in my business, and it was really cool. My team stepped up and ran the business without me.
Wow.
Uh, there were contractors that reached out to my team and said, "As long as Craig's in the hospital, we will do whatever you need." And it's truly the greatest accomplishment in my career.
Yeah, to have a great team like that. Now, did this event resharpen you, refocus you, readjust you? How did it affect you working in the business afterwards?
Well, coming back to business was hard. I got out of the hospital November 6th, and I just took the rest of the year off. I mean, I
Mm.
couldn't work if I tried. I did a little bit for, I started getting my feet wet again in December. Um, it was funny. My ads guy that had been running some ads for my clients, I started talking to him, and he was telling me about one client that needed a landing page. And I said, well, say, Kevin, would you like me to take a crack at writing that landing page copy? And he said, oh, that would be awesome. Well, normally, you know, most landing pages, I could write the copy in, 45 minutes or so, good persuasive copy. It took me 5 hours to do that.
Wow.
And then there's an accountant who, when I was lights out for me, he made sure my employees got paid, my vendors got paid. He made sure when my wife got paid, and
Mm.
made sure she knew how much money we had. He was just amazing. And I said, hey, I want to do something for you. And so sometimes we'll write an about us page for somebody's website, but our about us pages that we write are not like the typical ones. Usually we tell a story. And so I invited him over to the house and interviewed him for a couple hours, and figured out what to put on his about us page, and wrote something. Still real proud of what we wrote, but it took some work coming back. And I came back to work officially January 3rd of 22. And the typical work day was at that time was I'd work 2 or 3 hours, then take a nap, work a few more hours, take another nap. It's been hard. I mean, my lungs are still trashed from
Mm.
all that, and so I still have fatigue. I'm doing better. I just recently had two events, which one of them was out of town at 4,500 feet, so it was really stressing the lungs. It was a 2-day
Wow.
event where I had to be on both days. And now, granted, I was exhausted at the end of the days, but I did it, and that felt like a big accomplishment. One of the things that I did, this was back in January of 22, and I was still mostly in a wheelchair. I mean, I could walk short distances, but if I had to go very far at all, I still had to be in the wheelchair. And I was getting physical therapy, which is usually, that's from the weight. If you think of PT being the waist down, occupational therapy being the waist up, but I could get PT at home, but I couldn't get OT. So I
Hmm.
went out to this thing called Camp Gladiator, and which is you show up in a parking lot with a mat and some weights, and you do a workout for an hour. And so I went out there in January. It was cold. But I was like, I gotta get stronger, gotta get back. And showed up for a while with my wheelchair and my oxygen. I was still on oxygen back then. And what would happen, I would only do that on Saturdays, because when I got home, that was it.
Mm.
That was the one thing I could do for the day. I'd sit in the chair, look at the wall, and drool on myself for the rest of the day.
Wow. Yeah, you sent me pictures, yeah, of that as well. It's very, very inspirational. Very inspirational. And are you 100% back now, Craig? You said your lugs aren't there, but I mean, certainly you've got great attitude, you've got great energy.
Well, thanks. And this ties back into a question you had earlier. This, yeah, my lungs are still crap. I had a CT scan, 3-4 weeks ago, and the doc looked at them and she said, "Oh my goodness, your lungs are crap." I'm like, thanks.
Thanks.
So if I go out and I run 100 yards or a couple hundred yards, uh, it takes me a couple minutes to recover.
Jeez.
And so yeah, there's still some limitations. But this is not the path I would have chosen for myself, but it's been amazing. And the most
Mm.
amazing thing is it's by far the best thing that ever happened to my marriage. It's really
Mm.
pulled my wife and me together in a way that we were never together. That's been amazing. It's helped me see the world through the eyes of others in a way that I haven't before. Found out how hard it is to get into a bathroom if you're in a wheelchair. They got these doors with these powerful springs, powerful hinges that It's like the door's mission to keep you out, and you're sitting there
Mm.
trying to ram the door, trying to get through, hoping you can overpower the door. And I mean, I was weak. I'd withered away to nothing. I lost 40 pounds in the hospital, and the and I just never understood and or appreciated what folks who live their lives in wheelchairs go through just doing some basic things. It's it's it's
Hmm.
given me a lot of empathy for people that sure, I knew their life was hard, but I just didn't understand how hard. It's also given me some impatience for people who life dealt them a bad hand for some reason, and they just get stuck. And I'm like, well, what are you doing about it? Well, I'm stuck. I'm like, okay, I
Mm.
get that. What are you doing about it? Well, I'm stuck. I'm like, I'm sorry, the path back isn't easy. I can tell you that from personal experience. You just got to decide what you hate worse. Do you hate being stuck more than you hate the pain of getting unstuck?
Yeah, well said. When you were in the coma, could you hear conversations around you?
Yeah, well, I heard my wife. And then there's that time where the nurse denied denied me medical treatment that I needed.
Wow.
And nurse or tech, I don't know. They were wearing scrubs. Uh, the Yeah, and so here's one way of thinking about it. If you think of it as a continuum, going back to when they shot me full of morphine and it was lights out, um, I started having dreams sometime after that, and the dreams there were like really divorced from reality.
Mm.
Um, and on the other side of the continuum, the dreams were much closer to reality. And so on, the early dreams, I was driving exotic cars. I drove Michael Jordan's Ferrari. Um, my assistant's husband and I were taking joyrides in exotic cars, and it blew up on us, and we were about to be charged with grand theft auto. And so that's kind of the nature of the dreams there. As the dreams progressed, they started reflecting reality more and more. So here's an example of one. The I had a dream where I was in the North Carolina mountains, and um, and it was down in a valley by a river, and there was just kind of a community there, a lot of people related to each other, and doing all sorts of manual labor. And there was a patriarch that died while I was down there, and for some reason, so he had to be taken out of the valley, and I had to go with him. And there was a cable that ran through my nose, and I had to be drug uphill, and I was attached to him through the cable, and I had to be drug uphill with this cable going through my nose. And uh, and that was from there. I was put on a train, put on a gurney on a train that transported me somewhere else. Well,
Mm.
guess what? There was a period of time that I had feeding tubes through my nose, and I'm pretty sure this is the day
Wow.
that they took the feeding tubes out of my nose and put a feeding tube in my belly, something called a peg tube. And that was the cables going through my nose on the gurney on the train, taking me to a new location that was going down to the OR. There were conversations that happened there. Don't know exactly what happened, but there were some people that were upset about what was happening and about the way it was being done. My dream interpreted it in a different way.
Mm.
Here's something I don't talk about much. Different dream, actually a couple different dreams, but I had two dreams where I was being asked to falsify documentation,
Oh.
and two dreams where I was being grossly overcharged for services.
Whoa.
You kind of got to wonder, why did those show up in my dreams?
Mm. Mm. Hmm. They make money keeping you there.
They made a lot of money off me. They made a lot of money off me. The And I've dug into a little bit of that since getting out. Um, the through the CARES Act, one of the provisions in the CARES Act was if you tested positive for COVID within 14 days of treatment, if I'm reading it right, and it's only 2 pages where they talk about this, so it's not real complex. If I'm reading this right, it doesn't matter what the treatment is. The hospital's got a 20% bonus for that treatment as long as you tested positive for COVID within 14 days.
Wow.
Now, one of the things that would undo those bonuses is if you deviated from the FDA protocols. And there were multiple protocols floating around. There was one that when I was in the hospital had been published in a peer-reviewed study, showed efficacy in the treatment of COVID. And my wife and my stepson went to the doctors and said, we'd like you to give him this protocol. And the doctor said, absolutely not. Now, here's what's really bizarre. The doctors were always very clear with my wife. They said, he will die. He will not survive this. They never
Wow.
deviated from that story. So they were 100% convinced that I would die, but they weren't willing to try a protocol that was published in a peer-reviewed journal that gave hope that maybe there was a chance I could live.
What a horrible time in our history.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it'll be looked back at in such. I asked about if you could hear things in your coma. My just a little, about me. My father has had Alzheimer's for many years now, and he's at the stage now where it's, he's got no language, doesn't open his eyes, and he's in another country. I already said my goodbye to him, but my family was there with him recently, and they say it's very discouraging. And I keep saying, why bother go there? Why say anything? And then everybody says, you don't know what he can hear. So
Yeah.
when I hear what you said, I said, well, maybe he can hear that, even though he gives no response and he doesn't, I guess it's a bit of a selfish question, but I wonder, I don't know if there's any parallels that can be drawn, but we have to wonder because science won't tell us.
No, and the big lesson, my wife and I have both been telling people about this. One of the big lessons from our journey, if you have somebody you love that's in a coma, go to them and talk to them.
Mm,
And if there's somebody that comes in that room and says anything negative around them, throw them out. Throw them
mm,
out immediately.
mm,
Don't care what their title, rank, whatever is. Get surly with them. Throw them out.
mm,
There's
mm.
a reason. There's a reason my trust in doctors plummeted during the 6 weeks I was asleep.
Wow. They were speaking candidly around you when your wife wasn't there and but they're medical professionals. Why wouldn't they? Anyway,
Well, no,
that's
here,
what you
let me give you a
suspect.
real story. So again, the context is the doctors, everybody in the hospital, they threw out family. Everybody believed family had been successfully thrown out of the hospital. And so my wife's in my room one day and there's a respiratory tech in there who starts talking and says, his lungs are crap. He's not going to make it. It doesn't make any sense for me to give him this treatment,
Wow.
without realizing he's standing next to my wife.
Absolutely horrible, Craig. So, I always bring up the situation. Um, in the 90s, I started my business. I was working hard. I wasn't paying attention to myself, gained a lot of weight. And, the doctor in this case said a good thing to me. Said, if you don't lose, I was pre diabetic, pre hypertensive. If you don't lose the weight, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. She was just
Mm.
born. So I just made a conscious decision in my life. In the next year and a half, I lost about 140 pounds. And people always ask me, how I did it. And I always just say discipline. I wonder, given your extraordinary background, Craig, how discipline plays a role in your life.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the Marines for 6 years, and that was just an
Mm,
amazing time. The Um, you know, I don't know. I don't know how I'd make it through the last 2 years if I hadn't been in the Marines.
Mm.
The you know they taught me to push my body to places my mind didn't think it could go.
Hmm.
You know, and that's the thing. You know, when I was in boot camp, I figured out almost immediately success or failure in boot camp was won in the mind.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was extremely physical, but I mean, if you're 18 years old and you're in reasonable health, you can make it through Marine boot camp.
Right.
That's not the hard. It's not the physical limitation, it's the mental limitation. Can you keep your mind focused and at it?
Mm.
And you know, so you know, on the hard days, um, yeah, here's a real hard day. When I was in the LTAC, that was the second hospital. Sitting there, I hurt. I'm in pain constantly. Can't move, can't get out of bed, can't do anything for myself, can't wipe my own butt. And the I'm sitting in the room, same bed, same TV, day after day, and it sucked. And I knew tomorrow would suck, and the day after that would suck, and the day after that would suck. And there was one morning I started going to a very, very dark place.
Mm.
And I caught myself. It's like, you can't go there. You can't go there. And you talk about discipline. It takes disciplining the mind, disciplining thoughts to say, no, turn that around. And thankfully, I was able to turn it around in the afternoon because it's hard. It's hard. And, you know, when, when trying to learn how to walk again, um, and it's not only hard, it's scary, which probably doesn't make sense. But when you can't do anything for yourself
Right.
and you got to stand up and start walking, it's scary. And so it just takes discipline to show up and put the work in. You know, especially on the days you don't want to, and the days you don't think you can, you just don't have anything more to give.
It is wonderful that the Marines kind of the military is so good in shaping that. Before that, before the Marines, what would you say your relationship with discipline was? You
Oh,
weren't. Yeah.
I was a mess.
Okay.
I was, I, yeah, I was basically a stoner in high school, and I'd sit around. I slept through most of my classes. My goal was to kind of get a B. You know, graduate with a B average. Came in a little shy of that, but you know, I would do enough to kind of get a B, but you know, nothing more. Um, you know, and you know, I had the capability. I just squandered it. I just squandered it, and I just, you know, I realized at some point, I was like, you know, this isn't going to be a profitable future for me. Something's got to change.
And the Marines was your answer, and it was the right move, and it brought you to where you are now.
Yeah, it was awesome. You know, I remember meeting with the different recruiters. You know, I went and saw the Army recruiter, and you know, he looked like George McFly. And I was like, okay, well, we'll keep looking. Go to the Navy recruiter, and he looked like he had eaten a few too many Twinkies, and he was like, "Hey, we'll
Mm.
take anybody." And then I meet with the Marine recruiter, and he was force recon. You know, it looked like somebody drug him down a gravel road, and the gravel lost. And I just thought, that's where I need to be.
Yeah, I think you said to date it was your first best salesperson you ever met.
Yeah, yeah. I went in. My plan was join the Marine Corps for 3 years, maybe four. Dude, sign me up for 6. It was amazing. He got me, bagged me for 6 years. But it was great. And in hindsight, I'm glad I spent 6, not 4, not
Mm.
3. It was just, it was an amazing time. The fellow Marines are just amazing, amazing folks.
Hmm.
And I mean, let me tell you, tell a story about, so there's a retired Marine pilot lives right on my street. And when he heard I was in the hospital, my wife's sitting in the house one day and she hears a noise outside. She looks outside. He's mowing our grass. Nobody asked him to. He just showed up, started mowing our grass. He mowed our grass the entire time I was in the hospital.
Wow.
That's what Marines do for each other.
Wow. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. No, so that, yeah, it was good. The Marine Corps was awesome. Um, Certainly impacted my view towards life. This recovery has been an interesting journey. Um, and it's given me hope.
Yeah. Well, you give me hope, Craig. Craig Andrews, what motivates you?
What motivates me? Wow. You know, I, I struggle with that question, but I'll give you my best answer. One, I want to be a good husband to my wife.
Hmm.
Not just because she saved my life, but she's a wonderful woman. The, I believe there was a runner. I forgot his name. Olympic runner. This is like back almost 100 years ago. Just an amazing, amazing runner. And somebody asked him, they said, "Why do you run?" And he said, "I believe God has given me the ability to run fast.
Hmm.
And when I run fast, I give honor to him." And, I believe, God's given me some talents. I shouldn't be alive. And I believe, he basically grabbed me by the back of the collar and yanked me off the ledge a couple years ago.
Hmm.
Did so again back this winter when we had an ice storm, and I was helping my neighbor clear up some of his trees, and I got a little reckless with chainsaw and
Uh-oh.
the crap smacked out of me by a tree. My neighbor said it actually lifted me off the ground, hit me in the bottom of the jaw, broke a tooth, lifted me off the ground. And so it seems that God wants me to hang out for a little bit longer. And so he's given me talents. And the same way that runner, when he did his job well, he brought honor to God. That's what I want to do.
How do you measure success?
Um, I go back to being a good husband to my wife. Um, I would say serving serving my clients in a way that transforms their business, but not only transforms their business, transforms. I'm really serious about transforming the way that high ticket sales is done. I think it's broken, and I think we were talking about this first time offer thing we do. It's kind of like a coffee date. We believe that's better for everybody. We believe
Hmm.
it's you'll make more money doing it, but you'll make more money because it's a better experience for the customer and it's a better experience for you. It's better for everyone. And, I spent about 18 months fumbling around trying to figure this thing out before I sort of got it working, and then spent about 5 years perfecting it since then. And we know how to put together these offers. And when we do it well, and I'll tell you, when we're doing a client workshop with somebody, the biggest barrier that I run into in getting them to a really powerful offer is getting them out of sales mode. I actually have to spend a couple hours shifting their mindset to get them out of sales mode and put them into serving mode. And when I get somebody to start thinking about serving their customers, I mean truly serving them in a way that even if they didn't make money, their customers would walk away feeling enriched and having a better experience. That's when we start having the breakthroughs and we find these really powerful offers that work. And so when you ask me how I measure success, it's changing the way we do this by getting folks out of the mode of just relentlessly selling to people and into a mode where they serve people. And the byproduct is you make pretty good income when you do that. When you look to serve your customer instead of just sell them, you end up making a lot more money and they feel better about it.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, once it feels like a pitch, that's death. We
Yeah.
want to create that environment where they can buy, like you said earlier. Craig Andrews, it was an absolute pleasure talking with you today. I was so excited when we set this up, and I appreciate you and your story. How can anybody listening get in touch with you? And I also understand you have an offer.
Yeah. So our website is alliesforme.com. That's spelled ALLIES, the number 4, ME.com. And if you take that and you just add a slash discipline conversations, all lowercase, all one word, that will take you to a couple gifts that we have. So it's alliesforme.com/discipline conversations. And the first gift is we put together a guide to help folks avoid some of the mistakes that I made. Yeah, I made a lot of mistakes in this journey of putting together these offers, and this guide will help you guide that in. But we're also giving 23-day access to a self-paced course that we have. And the reason we limit it to 23 days, I've signed up for free courses that I've never taken, and we know enough about human behavior that if we gave you a free course, you'd sign up, you'd never do it. We're in the business of changing lives. That's our mission. We want to change the way high ticket sales is done. So we see it in the analytics. When we put this time limit on it, people actually go in and use it. So if you go to that link, alliesforme.com/discipline conversations, it will take you in. You can get those tools. We have, if you want to reach out directly, we have a link on our menu that says get started. And there's a way to contact us there. And that's the best way to get in touch.
Fantastic, Craig. I appreciate it so much. If next time I'm in your neck of the woods there in Texas, perhaps Karen, you and I will have a cup of coffee.
Oh,
Thanks
that would
so
be
much for your
awesome.
time. I really
Thanks, Bill.
appreciate it. Well, we'd have to go 5-6 hours to Louisiana, but maybe next time. We'll just stay there. Craig, thanks so much. I appreciate your time. You be well.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.